Frank Tamillo was killed in an undercover operation in a hotel in Midtown Manhattan by drug dealers. He went in to buy drugs in the hotel room. These guys came in to rip him off. They killed Frank. The surveillance team was in an adjoining room. They come through the door. They shot the supervisor, Tom Devine, and Tom Devine was crippled in a wheelchair.
Welcome back to this week's edition of Game of Crimes with Murph in the Morning. Man, I am tickled to death with what we've got going this week. We have a legend. And you hear me say that about a lot of guys that come on here from law enforcement. But this guy, I had the pleasure of meeting him just a few years ago, and we'll talk about that here shortly. But his name is Lew Rice, a 26-year veteran of the Drug Enforcement Administration. He was, at the end of his career, he was the special agent in charge of the New York Field Division, which is, back in his day, was the biggest, I'm sure he'll say the most powerful, most respected field division in DEA. Us folks from Miami, we always, we kind of argue that point, but it's all good natured. But it's a true pleasure and an honor to have Mr. Lew Rice on here. Lew, thank you so much for coming on the show, brother.
Steve, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to spend some time with you to talk about the great work that's done each and every day by the DEA agents and the DEA family globally.
Man, let me tell you, when this guy talks, I'm getting goosebumps sitting here, literally. And when Lew talks, you want to go grab a gun and a badge and go out and kick somebody's ass and take their name. I mean, that's what that's the kind of motivation this guy presents to everybody. But for all you listeners, thank you so much for coming back every week. You know, we couldn't do this without you, so thank you for your continued support. If you haven't checked us out on Patreon yet, do me a favor, go to patreon.com/gameofcrimes. Join us over there for some serious stuff and some kind of stupid stuff over there. Well, but it's always a lot of fun. If you're listening to this and you haven't checked us out on YouTube, do me a favor, go to YouTube, type in Game of Crimes Podcast at the top. Go down, click on the subscribe button, watch a few episodes, hit the like button, send me your comments. Okay. So like I do every week, for those of you that come back every week, you know this. I don't tell the guest about Small Town Police Blotter until like the night before. And I sent it to Lew last night about 9:30 because I was busy doing some other stuff. And in about 3 minutes, he responded and says, man, I'll do it. So no questions whatsoever. But Lew, before we start, we got a little disclaimer. This is a show about crime. We talk about bad people. We talk about bad people doing bad things to good people. Now, we take our show very seriously, but we never want to miss the opportunity to have a good laugh at the expense of some idiot who thought they were qualified to be a criminal, because most of them aren't. So Lew is stationed, he's in New Jersey right now. So I pulled a story from New Jersey, and I've got one from Florida. So Lew, take it away, sir.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Murph. So there's an old expression, a whole other shade of stupid, implying they're stupid. Then there's amazingly stupid. It's beyond belief. If you want 100 pounds of methamphetamine sent to you for the purpose of selling it, you're going to have somebody use a nondescript rental vehicle, use a fake credentials or ID, or maybe a stolen car, right?
Yep.
No. This genius from my state of New Jersey decided to use the United States Postal Service and just have them mail the methamphetamine to him. Authorities say that Michael Vendetti, 39 of Camden, New Jersey, received multiple packages of meth this way between March and September of 2021. Police say he was arrested and charged after they searched a house in Camden, New Jersey, and found 8 pounds of meth and $29,000 in cash and narcotics paraphernalia and scales. Investigators broke up the operation when they flagged a package set to be shipped from Calexico, California, which is a border town on the U.S.-Mexico border, a location known to law enforcement for narcotic distribution, to an apartment in Blackwood, New Jersey. The United States postal inspectors pulled the package aside and had a canine dog alert positive for the presence of narcotics. As if all this wasn't already a whole other shade of stupid, this was Vendetti's first bust. He had previously been arrested for conspiring to distribute methamphetamine. You'd think he would have learned something about federal laws having been through the system before. Like maybe, just maybe, if you're going to have methamphetamine delivered to you, maybe not through a federal agency. Just a thought.
And Lou, we have one rule. We only have one rule on the game of crimes here, and that rule is kids don't do meth.
Right.
Because that's what it makes you do, stupid things.
Stupid things, right.
And some of those guys are such slow learners, but we talk about this with some of the other guests on here. And this might be a little dig at us, but I mean, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit out there, isn't there?
There is. Yes, there is. You wonder it's an example of a guy using the product, so his mind is clouded, because if you were thinking straight, you'd say maybe not, especially if you've been arrested for it before.
Well, back in our day, you didn't keep the drugs and the money together. You always kept those separate.
Separate, that's right.
Thank you for reading that, Lou. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
So now we're coming to my home state here of Florida, where, as you know, we have no shortage of idiots that think they're criminals here. And this guy, came out from November this year, so just last month. Actually, then November 25, because I think this will be posted in January. A Florida man, there you go, who apparently mistook a 7-Eleven toilet for a Ritz-Carlton bathroom, was arrested for striking a female clerk in the face with a wad of his chewing tobacco. That's gross. Due to the convenience store's lack of toilet paper. Okay. Investigators say Dalton Albert, 40 years old, certainly old enough to know better than this, entered the Pinellas Park business around 8:30 a.m. to utilize the bathroom. Albert subsequently argued with the victim, Razia Sultana, over the lack of toilet paper. As recorded by a security camera, Albert gathers a wad of tobacco from his mouth and throws it at the victim, striking her in the face. Now, I'm not a tough guy. I never have been, but you do something like that, and I think we're going to fight. Mm-hmm. So anyway, the cops, they show up. They reported that Sultana had remnants of the defendant's spit and tobacco on her face and clothing. Charged with misdemeanor battery, Albert was booked into the county jail, released on a $1,000 bond, and according to court records, his rap sheet includes convictions for passing bad checks, marijuana possession, theft, driving with a revoked license, and careless driving. Man, that is just nasty. It's not even really funny. It's just nasty. No. But this whole thing, small town police blotters, is all about the stupid criminals out there. So I think they're two shining examples today.
and people can reflect and say, not me. They're not going to catch me doing that stuff.
Well, especially the meth. I just, you see meth heads, the tweakers out there, and you see the scabs on their faces, and their skin is just, they just have that death look about them. I've never understood why people want to put that mess in their bodies.
Well, you make a good point, Murph, when you talk about the scabs on their faces. And to me, that's a good part of the prevention, especially for young people, to say, if you use this substance, this is what you're going to look like, and nobody wants to go out like that.
You're right. And there's actually, and folks, you might want to Google this. Just look at photographs of meth victims, or meth users, tweakers, whatever they're called. I've seen photographs of girls who are just stunningly beautiful, young girls. And then after they become tweakers, they look like death warmed over. I mean, you'd never give them a second look. They just look like they're waiting to die.
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty morbid. Let's talk about something better. So how do we meet? If I remember right, Lou, we were together at a DEA Educational Foundation event up in New York City. Is that where we first met?
Right. Probably about 2003, maybe.
That sounds right. And I came in. There was a one of the famous people from Fox News was a guest at that event.
Right.
And I think there was an old DEA administrator there. It wasn't Jack Long, but I can't remember which one it was.
Was that inside the Metropolitan Club?
That's it. That's the one.
It was Bob Stubman.
There you go.
He sat on a panel and then talked about opioids.
Yep. And that's another legend in DEA.
Yes. Without a doubt. He put DEA on the map.
The thing I liked about that event and all these educational foundations is Jill Roberts calls me a lot to do this at least once a year, but sometimes a little bit more. And I love doing it. Mm-hmm. The kids were there, the little kids, the dancers.
Yes.
And so they wanted to get a picture with me, and we all got suits on and everything. And I got down on the floor and sat on the floor with them.
Isn't that something?
And their parents are looking at me like, oh my gosh, that man sat on the floor with the children,
For the
getting his
kids,
clothes dirty.
Right.
But it was, those kids just, I mean, they make the whole thing.
Murph, as you're talking, I'm reflecting on that event. I think most people don't realize that, we're special agents. We do investigations. We have guns. We have handcuffs. But it's all about the kids.
Yep.
It's all about the kids. What we won't do to try to protect these kids, And when you mentioned the DEA Educational Foundation, we have to talk about the founder, Billy Alden. Who unfortunately passed away last year. But what a man. He took his work and his passion for narcotics enforcement when he retired from DEA and created the Educational Foundation. And 30 years later, still going strong. But what a man.
Billy was, I remember meeting Billy on the 12th floor when, after he retired. And I mean, he had access to the 12th floor, which he should have.
Yes.
And then when I got involved with the Educational Foundation, he was my mentor on how to get things going and everything. And he and I ended up being joint members on an advisory council for a corporation up in Minneapolis that produces at-home kits that will destroy your prescription medications.
Right. Okay.
DEA.
Right, DEA. Right.
Yeah. So Billy's he's another legend.
Yeah, he is definitely. I mean, a heart of gold, and he's one of those guys. If you spent 5 minutes with him, whatever he asked you to do, you'd have to agree, because again, it was all about the kids. There's what we're doing is going to help these kids.
It's corny to say, but it's really the kids are our future. And if we don't invest our time in them, what can we expect?
Yeah. And that's what I think the public doesn't really realize, that the connection when they look at law enforcement and you have the guns and the badges and the handcuffs, but we're all parents. We all have kids, grandkids, nieces and nephews, and it's all about giving them the chance to live full and productive lives. That's what it's all about.
Absolutely. So there you go, everybody. If you want some motivation for the day, you just heard it.
There you go. Anything for the kids.
Lew, let's talk a little bit about your life. Where you grew up, your brothers and sisters, what did mom and dad do? What did you play sports in school? Did you go to college? That kind of thing.
So first off, and you alluded to it in the introduction, I'm a native New Yorker, a proud native New Yorker, and I'm one of those guys that feels the sun doesn't shine anywhere but in New York City. So I'll say it right up front. So I grew up in New York. Grew up in the projects in New York. The youngest sister. My dad was a New York City detective, a Harlem detective, and I always say a proud Harlem detective. Yeah. And my mother worked for the Department of Social Services. It's just that life in New York, those experiences, especially during the 70s, and when you think about it, when I grew up, in the 60s and the 70s, we had the unpopular war in Vietnam. We had instability in the government with Watergate. We had the civil rights struggle where African Americans were striving for parity in employment, education, and housing. And on top of all that, we had an economic crisis in New York City, where, there's a legendary, I think it was the Daily News in 1971 to 72, where President Ford said that New York dropped dead. And on top of all that, we had a heroin problem. And New York was ground zero. And heroin is a drug that puts people to sleep. It kills ambition. They get physically addicted, and then they go out committing all kind of crimes. So it was just a tough place to grow up in during that time in New York City. And DEA was formed during that time, and it was formed specifically because by President Nixon, July of '73, to combat the heroin use. Unfortunately, there was a lot of corruption in the police department during that time. You had the NAP Commission, you had Serpico, you had movies written about it, and they created a federal agency, and who knew if it was going to work, specifically to go after the heroin dealers. And nobody knew if it was going to work, because if you think about it, narcotics enforcement worldwide, it's an assignment in most law enforcement organizations where people rotate in and they rotate out. Why? Because of the danger, corruption factor, and you just get burned out after a while. But DEA is a single mission agency, and that's all the agents do. And so it was a thought, but hey, we're going to give it a try. And
Yeah.
we're still there 50 years later,
Yeah.
fortunately.
Yeah, some true heroes in the agency too.
Yes.
It's a little known agency. We've always seemed to not boast about our successes, and other agencies are in the news all the time, and DEA never has been, which I never agreed with. I think we've done a poor job of selling ourselves.
Yeah.
But I wasn't in charge, so and nobody ever asked me what my opinion was. So,
yeah, but I have to say, Murph, you and your partner Javier, and I told you this off camera. You make the retirees, like from my generation, extremely proud on what you guys are doing, putting DEA's name out there in the media, and especially your relationship with Netflix and Narcos. People start to understand what we do, and when they understand what you do, you have supporters. So engaging with the media may not have been a number one strategy many, many years ago, but in 2025 and going forward for DEA success, you have to talk to the media, because that's how you build support from the population, because they get distracted in so much feeding with Instagram and all these social medias. If you're not playing in those arenas, then they don't know who you are, and they need to know. It's a way of celebrating the men and women of DEA. So thank you for what you guys do. Thank you very much. You make us proud.
Thank you for saying that. And coming from you, I mean, that truly that means the world. I'm kind of blushing here. So
I can tell you, we were talking off camera. We talked about that event with Bob Stubman, who put DEA on the map in the 80s. And I remember when he was the SAC, I mean, he was on all the TV shows, Donahue, Geraldo. And I remember one Nightline presentation where they were talking about crack cocaine. And here is Jesse Jackson was on one side. The mayor of the mayor of New York, Ed Koch, was on the other side. And in the middle was the SAC of New York, Bob Stubman. And my mother-in-law, who's a native New Yorker, also from Brooklyn, told me, she said, now I know what you do, And I had been an agent for about 8 years now. But she didn't really understand what I did until she saw Bob Stubman in that arena explaining what the agents do on a day-to-day basis, and just raised the bar for DEA.
He is an extremely intelligent man. Yeah. At that event we were at together, I did get the opportunity to talk to him, and we followed up a little bit afterwards just to try to stay in touch, and life busy and
sure.
But what an impressive individual, just like you.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for me, but he still has it. He still has that, man. He just has a gift of gab, and presents very well, and really raised the bar from a SAC in New York, not from a headquarters position. People started to understand what DEA did,
And that's the difference. He's well spoken. I mean, I can ramble on and confuse people, and I confuse myself, but that's why I say he's a very intelligent man, because he presents. In fact, he presented a visual representation of the number of people that were being killed by opioids. And so was this before COVID? I think it might have been.
Yeah, before COVID. Mm-hmm.
And his visualization was, what if a commercial airliner crashed every day of the year in the United States and killed 300 people? What would our response be?
Right.
And I'm thinking, man, it'd be total outrage.
That's right.
But yet we've got the same issue going with the opioid crisis and now the fentanyl crisis, and people are just blasé about it. Yeah. It's just, that's the way it is.
Yeah,
but I still use that representation today from Bob Stubman.
It's so accurate. It's so accurate and so timely.
And if you can get people to stop and think about it, that's how you start to generate curiosity and then hopefully some progress forward. I know it's an uphill battle.
It is, but, that's why it's good with even, there's a pros and cons to everything, but with the social media, you get to have a discussion and educate people's minds so they understand, and I'm a firm believer with information, especially credible information. You want to make good decisions,
Absolutely. I'm with you, man. I'm with you. So when you were in high school, did you play any sports or you just chase girls?
I played. I went to a Catholic school for first, 8th grade, and it was co-ed. So we had the boys and the girls. We had a lot of fun, and in the neighborhood, it was an annual tradition every Easter. we would dress up, get on the train, and go out to Coney Island on Easter Sunday. You know, a bunch of girls, bunch of guys, and just have fun and go to the movies and just play around and just have a good time. And then heroin came in, and I started to see my friends, either. After they came out from Vietnam, they became addicted to heroin. So they wanted to go to the movies. They wanted to go to Coney Island. They wanted to hang out with the girls, but they wanted to get heroin first. And slowly but surely, some overdosed and some started to live unpredictable lives, lives where they didn't realize their full potential. And I saw the devastation in their families. It was like overnight. They got involved in something. Yes, 18, 19 years old. They're in a foreign country. They got an M16. They don't really know the lay of the land and trying to prevent from getting killed or severely wounded. And, drugs were easily available and they probably used and experimented and got hooked after they left the service and were actually trying to chase that bag. So although my dad, I loved my dad. I adored my dad. I really didn't want, my focus was not to go into the police department. I wanted to go into probation and parole and help people. Because, the relationship between young black males and the police department wasn't a healthy relationship, not like it is now, right, where you have the explorers and different, youth groups and whatnot that bring youngsters together with the police. It wasn't like that back then. So I wanted to go into the rehabilitation field. But then, I was a career day. I was a senior at St. John's University. And he had one of the special agents from the New York office there recruiting. And, it's HR now, but it was a personnel specialist back then. And they talked about this new agency, DEA, and, we're going after the drug guys and you work undercover. And, all that stuff sounds exciting, especially when you're 21 years old. And I said, yeah, I could do that, because in my head, I'm saying, I'm going to go after the guys that destroyed the lives of my friends and their families. So I mean, it would never happen like that now, but I graduated in May, June, and in October of the same year, 1974, I swore in as a special agent. I was 21 years old. There was not a school scheduled. So I came to the office every day. There was a school scheduled in January of the following year. So for 3 months, I just came to the office, went to an enforcement group, and I was fortunate to be assigned to one of DEA's legendary supervisors, Frank White. And he's a man that I always say, if anybody ever writes the story of federal narcotics enforcement, going back to FBN, Federal Bureau of Narcotics, and the Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs, and then DEA, he'll have his own chapter. He was a Vietnam war hero, Silver Star medalist, and just had a knack for bringing good planning to very dangerous situations. And from his perspective, the danger he faced as a leader in Vietnam, he was taking everything he learned to the dangerous streets of New York City. And working with him, we were out there a lot of nights.
My whole career, I heard about Frank White. I met him once, but just briefly. But I didn't know he was on the job in 74. I didn't realize.
Yeah. And in fact, he was a supervisor in 74, and he would always tell a story about his partner, who was killed 2 years early, Frank Tamillo.
Oh, yeah.
Frank Tamillo was killed in an undercover operation in a hotel in Midtown Manhattan. By drug dealers. He went in to buy drugs in the hotel room. These guys came in to rip him off. They killed Frank. The surveillance team was in an adjoining room. They come through the door. They shot the supervisor, Tom Devine, and Tom Devine was crippled in a wheelchair. I think it was October 12th, 1972. Frank DeMillo was killed on the spot. Tom Devine was paralyzed in a wheelchair and died 10 years later. And not having met either one of them, Frank was a good leader and he would tell the stories. So you'd learn the history of the organization. And I was fortunate when I became the SAC of New York, we had a special day and, we renamed the training room as the Frank Tomillo and then Tom Devine Training Center. Nice. And we had Tom Devine's wife come in with a couple of her sons. We had Frank Tomillo's sister, his dad come in. It was just a night. And Jim Milford was the deputy administrator. He came down from Washington, D.C., and we just had a great day in the office. And as Frank would tell those stories to me in 74, in 97, I'm telling him to the agents there in the New York office, connecting them to let them know that, they're on the front line now, but they come from a long line of people that are doing the same thing. And we're learning from those experiences. And what happened in 72 could have happened in 97 in New York City. So it was a great day. We had an all hands meeting, brought all the agents into the training room and did a formal rededication of that training center in the name of Frank Tomillo and Tom Devine.
Excellent. And everybody, we're going to talk about this later on in the show, but he's got a book. Lew has a book that he wrote back when he retired, DEA Special Agent, My Life on the Front Line. I'll tell you more about it at the end of the show. You can find it on Amazon. You can find it on eBay. But if you want to find out what drug trafficking, what a drug agent, a narc was doing in New York City, and we're going to talk about all the places, because let me tell you, he had a very worldwide career. A lot of excitement going on. We're going to talk about a lot of his stories today, but if you want to read about it, go check that out. It's DEA Special Agent, My Life on the Front Line by Lew Rice. And Lew is L-E-W, not L-O-U, okay? All right, so here you are. You're out of the academy. Well, let me ask you, when you went in the academy, first of all, the fact that you got out of college in June and got hired in October, it took me 2 years.
Right.
Right. But I was a cop for 12 years before that. But I guess there was all that background investigation stuff. I don't know.
Right. Well, what happened when I went through the interview, I mean, there was a couple of people, and 3 senior agents, supervisor interview panel in New York, and one said, the guy's 21 years old, he's too young. And then, another guy said, but that would work to our advantage. Look, he looks like a baby. Nobody would ever make him for a Fed. He could work undercover all throughout the 5 boroughs and whatnot. Nobody would ever make him as a Fed, because usually the way is local police, then into the federal agency or through the military. At 21 with no facial hair, let's bring him in. And what swung it for me, as I found out later on, is one of the panel members said, well, his dad is a Harlem detective, so he understands what we do, and he'll be a good mentor for him. Let's give him a shot,
Yeah. And that's true. I mean, that's legacy.
Yes.
A lot of guys like that. Seems like, especially in New York, it seems like there's a lot of guys that their families are multi-generations of law enforcement.
Oh, 100%. 100. It's a great job, great opportunity. And they always need people, they always need people, it's a tough job too.
As we talk about here all the time on the show, there's no greater calling than serving your fellow man as a public servant. That's a badge of honor.
You say that, and I tell people, as corny as that sounds, is, you go to work and, you may have a flat tire or you got a problem and somebody didn't get promoted or disciplined, and it's all the craziness, but the good feeling you felt every morning going in there because you were helping people. You go to neighborhoods and people would beg you to come in there. We need to do something about the drug problem. I want to be able to go out. I have my kids go out and not being pushed on to sell drugs or use drugs. So you really felt empowered that you're helping people for no other reason. That's the right thing to do.
Yeah. Even in the later on in the career, I ran the mobile enforcement team out of Atlanta for a couple of years.
Okay, the Meth team.
And we would go into a lot of small communities in between Georgia, Tennessee, North Carolina, South Carolina. And you had these gangs that were in it's rural America, and they've taken over the neighborhoods. And so The older folks they're afraid to sit on their porches. They're afraid to go out walking. And so when we take those people down, the neighbors would literally come out on the side of the street as, we have our big procession of cars going out led by marked cruisers, and they're out there clapping for us.
Yeah, yeah.
You talk about, there's no better feeling than that. I mean, you felt like, you actually had a positive impact on the community, even though it's a little small town.
You mentioned that, Murph, and I remember the early days. Everybody thinks the feds, we have a lot of money, but we didn't have a lot of money as a small agency, and most of the vehicles we had were vehicles that we seized.
Yeah.
Because government vehicles. I remember, there was 3 of us in one car. And one guy would pick up the second guy and pick up the third guy, and you get to the office. But we would seize a lot of cars. We'd seize Mercedes and BMWs and Jaguars and Lincolns and Caddies, but they became basically police cars because people would get thrown up against the Mercedes, the Lincoln, the Caddy, handcuffed and put in. And when you mention about local support, we spent a lot of time in Harlem in the 70s. Okay. Harlem in the 70s is nothing like the Harlem in 2025, 2026. Okay. There was no reason to go to Harlem in the 70s but to buy heroin, and the winter time was like the night of the living dead. You'd have the steel drums, wood inside with fires and people walking around getting warm and whatnot. But when we would go up there to Harlem, people would recognize the cars. They'd recognize the yellow Caddy, and they knew those were the feds. And you'd see black women in the windows doing this clapping. They couldn't come downstairs and clap because the drug guys had taken over the neighborhood. But they were happy that we were up there. And why were they happy? Because they knew this was the feds. And they knew we're going to take these guys out on Thursday. They're not going to be out here on Friday, because of the strategy of DEA, working closely with the federal prosecutors. We're doing an investigative agency. We're proving the case, and anybody who works with prosecutors know they want more evidence than that's needed because they want to be able to convince the jury beyond a reasonable doubt if the person goes to trial. And people started to see the change in the community, because these people were taken out and they weren't coming back for years. And suddenly there's a vitality where the kids can go to school, walk to school, and not be preyed upon by the drug dealers.
And that's why, I go off on tangents all the time, but you go back to here just in the last few years where one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard of in my life was defund the police.
Right.
And the people that are being hurt by that are the people that you and I were just talking about that are afraid to come out. Yeah. Go ask them if they want to defund the police.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that, because the conversation that, the people that say that are people that say it, they're at the cocktail party or the reception. But if you're in the neighborhood, they're not saying that defund the police. No. They're saying exactly, I want more police. And when you have a conversation with people in the neighborhood, the conversation is the neighborhood wants police that are in the neighborhood on a regular basis. So they know the kid who's got his pants sagging and his hat backwards is wearing that as a style, not because he's in a gang. And if you're in there on a regular basis, that kid, what school he's going to, what mom or dad does, and he's a kid. He's doing the style. He's listening to the music. He's not in a gang. But that only happens when you have police inside the neighborhood on a regular basis, and you realize there's a lot of support, a lot of support. And I'm on the. I co-chair the security committee for the Harlem Business Improvement District on 125th Street in particular. And I can tell you, the meetings where we're meeting with the police commander, the 2A precinct that handles Western Harlem. And the conversation is from the real estate, the store owners, and the residents. We want more cops. We want more cops. We want more cops, because they realize that, when the cops are there, people can go to work. They don't have to look over their shoulders. They can, if you like retail, you can sell the product. Customers are going to come in. There's going to be a vitality, to the neighborhood.
I want to mention too, our DEA listeners out there, what basic agent trainee class were you in? What was your number?
Number 8. Number 8.
Yeah. Wow.
I mean, I'm an old guy, number 8. and it's funny too. I used to be the youngest wherever I went. I was the youngest guy in the academy at 22, but basic agent class number 8. Yeah.
I tell you, you're still looking like a young man here on the screen. I'm looking at you.
It's the products. What number are they up to now in the agent class?
I came on in 87 and I was in class 53. But the DEA Academy brings Javier and I in to speak to the we call them back classes, everybody, basic agent trainee. And so we get the opportunity to go up a couple times a year and speak to the back classes at nighttime after they've had dinner. And the last time we were up there, the class was 253. 253.
Wow. 200 classes. Wow. That's amazing. Okay.
This means we're old folks, right?
Yeah, I know. But some great memories. They keep us smiling, they keep us young,
I want to ask you about a guy that I read about in your book that I actually know, not like you do, but a guy named Sterling Johnson.
Legend.
He is.
Legend.
Now you knew him as what?
I knew him as a special narcotics prosecutor, but he knew my dad because Sterling was in the NYPD. He was in the police department. Sterling was in the police department, and he's from Brooklyn, so he knew my dad. As in the police department and in the neighborhood, as young kids, because my dad was from Brooklyn, legendary guy. He's the kind of guy. Whatever he can do to help you, he's going to help you and tell a story, tell a funny story.
He was, and where I met him was after I transferred back from South America. Javier, I was in North Carolina. Javier was stationed in Puerto Rico at the time, and a guy named Dandini Munoz Mosquera, a.k.a.
Oh, sure. He had that case.
Yeah.
He was the guy that was skinning people alive.
Yeah, so we go in to testify, and for some reason they didn't sequester us. And so we got to sit in there, and you see Sterling sitting on that big bench up above everybody. And I loved it because the defense attorney would step up to object, and before he could get halfway through his proclamation there, Sterling's overall sit down.
Right.
He was no nonsense.
Right. Well, when you think of his career, he was a U.S. Marine, right? He was an AUSA in the Southern District. He was a New York City police officer. I think he was when he left, he was a sergeant. Went to law school at night and graduated at the top 10% of his class.
Wow.
He spent a year with DEA in 73, 74 when DEA was first formed. Was a special narcotics prosecutor for about 15, 16 years and a federal judge since 91, nominated by Bush 1. But with all of that experience, and he was on a White House council about drugs, he was just, if you ever met him, you'd never know he had those positions. He's easy to tell a joke, quick to tell a joke, quick to smile, and everybody talks about him walking around that courthouse in the Eastern District as a federal judge, well, not with his robe on, but in the hall twirling his nightstick, because he always got enjoyment out of twirling that nightstick as a police officer. Yeah.
I've got all the respect in the world for him.
He was something, a legend.
Now, when you're in New York, you guys are working these heroin cases. Was cocaine around at the time?
It's a good question. So I started in 74, came out of the academy 75. I left New York in 82. We had cocaine cases, but cocaine was considered a party drug. Kiddie dope. We weren't doing investigations. If somebody said they had cocaine, let's try to order up a couple of kilos, and knock it off. The priority was heroin because of the petty crime, carjackings, purse snatchings, instability in the streets. Media would write about it. Politicians would talk about it. The community wasn't all up in arms. The drug addicts were a scary sight. So the focus was go after the heroin guys. So we didn't really pay attention to cocaine. I mean, you could not get money to do a cocaine investigation. If you're going to do if you have an informant that says somebody's selling cocaine, set it up for a knockoff. Try to order as much as you can, and then we're going to arrest these people, see if we can flip them. But we're not going to spend time doing surveillance and trying to identify where they're getting it from and all that stuff,
Yeah, I remember. So I get to Miami in '87 out of the academy, and it wasn't long after that Tom Cash came in.
Yes, out of New York. Yeah. Right.
I remember him talking about kitty dope. Oh, this is cocaine. That's not real dope. You got to make a heroin case. Well, heroin wasn't the problem
because he was coming out of New York, right? Yeah. He was he was one of the ASACs back then in the late early '80s. Yeah, I remember Tom Cash. Yeah, and then I think after Cash left Miami, Gruden came in, right? No, Gruden. I think Gruden was before Cash.
Yeah, you're right. He was.
Yeah. Because I left Miami December of '86. So when you got there, I just had left with Gruden.
Yeah. So it was comical because I get there in '87, and the first. I'm working with a senior agent named Gene Frankar. You probably know Gene.
I know the name. Sure.
Gene, one of the smartest men I've ever met in my life.
Yes.
He puts me on an undercover boat. We take the 53-foot Hatter sport fishermen in the Turks and Caicos Islands and pick up 400 kilos. I've never seen that kind of dope in my life. And then for Tom Cash to come in and say, that's just kitty dope.
Kitty dope, isn't that something? Yeah.
We made a believer out of him.
Yeah, well, I'm sure. But that was the difference. Coming out of New York, the whole focus was on heroin. It was like, we want to get some heroin guys. But Miami wasn't a heroin place. It was mostly all cocaine. In fact, it was a gateway. I mean, during that time, everybody in the United States, if they weren't going overseas, they were coming into Miami to pick up large amounts of cocaine. I think the courthouse had minimum mandatories. I'll never forget. We locked up a guy with 5 kilos of cocaine. This would have been 85, 86, and the Southern District of Florida didn't prosecute. That's nothing, Meanwhile, in New York, they got life in prison without parole. They weren't going to prosecute,
You know what the threshold was in South Florida for marijuana?
What?
5,000 pounds.
Yeah. Which was crazy, which was crazy. But you're coming out of an environment in New York where everything was tight, and it took you a while to get to that inner circle. And I was down there in Miami. That was my first supervisory assignment in Miami, 84 to 86. And I explained to people that my impression of Miami when I got down there was when you landed at Miami International, they said, welcome, gave you a kilogram of Coke and a 9mm and said, welcome to Miami. Because everybody had large amounts of Coke and guns. Everybody. If you went to the nice hotel, Fontainebleau or whatever, and talked to the concierge, you could get large amounts of Coke before the day's over.
Oh, absolutely. We used to say, if you can't make a dope case in Miami during that time, you better go find a different occupation.
Right. It was amazing. It was just, that's how everything exploded. Everything was coming in through Miami. And I was convinced, although I couldn't prove it, I was convinced that these guys, where you were in South America at some point, would send a plane in, call it in on their own. Customs would bring it down at 800 pounds of cocaine. We'd slap 5, take pictures, have a big press conference, and then 10 other planes would come in. Boom, 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 boom.
Absolutely.
I said, we're distracted thinking we did such a good job and letting all this other cocaine in. It was just crazy working.
Absolutely. There's a couple of things I want to ask you about your time in New York. One is you tell a story in the book about a guy named Herbie Sperling. Just a cold-hearted, stone-cold criminal. Just tell everybody what you said about what he said.
So when I started in the 70s, you had the Italian mafia, you had the Jewish mob, and you had the Harlem black drug dealers and whatnot. So the mafia, large amounts of heroin. The Jewish guys like Sperling were like the go-between in the middle to the Harlem drug dealers. And so the old-time agents would tell me the story about the day they arrested Herbie Sperling. They had Sperling in one room, and his mother was in the other room. And they told Herbie that, we can do some things, So what do you mean? We arrested your mother, but, maybe we reduced the charges, but, if you cooperate. And they said Herbie didn't blink, didn't bat an eye, but looked the agent straight in the face and said, "My mom can do her time."
Oh, jeez.
He died in prison. I mean, he went to jail under like with a 50. I don't think he got life, but he got like 50 years, and like a real 50 years. But he was just an old time tough guy, gangster. In fact, there was when he died in prison, there was a write up, a quote that when he got stopped in Budget, he was driving a Budget rental car,
right,
and he had a couple of kilos of heroin in the trunk, and the cops said, "Hey, you got heroin, you got 6 kilos of heroin in the trunk." He said, "What? I'll never rent a car from Budget again." Jesus Christ. He said, "I know I should have went to Avis." I mean, he was just that old time New York gangster that was never going to cooperate and died in jail and died in jail. But that's the kind of guys that were around during that time, But then the sentencing law changed.
Right.
And, we got to the minimum mandatories in the 80s, I think, when Clinton was the president, and that the only departure from the guidelines was if you were crazy, and then the government would bring in their own psychiatrist and say, totally sane, like Chinjiganti, right? Or you cooperated. So all these guys were cooperating. You see mob bosses cooperate, And so from my vantage point, seeing this happen in New York, I said the last gangster we really had was John Gotti, in my mind, because that was the life. He swore to the life, and he knew he was going to get caught sooner or later, and he was going to do his time.
Yeah.
But right now, I mean, everybody wants to join America's team. I mean, nobody wants to go to jail, I mean, we had people cooperating so quickly in New York City. Before we got back, let's say, from Queens to Brooklyn into Manhattan, maybe a 45-minute or hour ride because of the traffic, I put a payphone near the lockup where, if you did a subscriber, and it would come back to a payphone in the street, but we'd get these guys on the payphone and record it so they can, hey, call this guy right now, and go over, what you've been doing with them and set them up for another deal,
We used to say the first to snitch gets the best deal.
That's right. And these guys know it too. And that's a good message for young people that, there is no, if you think about it, there's no like gangster with a 401k or retirement plan and whatnot, realizing that, sooner or later these guys get caught and they're going to give you up because if they cooperate, they got to talk about everything they've done. So it's not even worth it. It's not even worth it,
So there's one case that you worked on up there that, was very surprising, and it was groundbreaking at the time. And these guys weren't heroin dealers, were they? They were providing cut materials. So if you can tell us a little bit about that and the famous person that you got to snitch.
Sure. This is the case involving the American gangster, Frank Lucas, in the 1970s, late 77, 78. Frank had already been arrested. He was doing 70 years, 40 years with the feds in New York, 30 years at the state of New Jersey to run consecutively, which means you'd have to do the 40 years. After you finish that, he'd get transferred to the state of New Jersey to the 30 years. And also, you mentioned the legendary Sterling Johnson. He had a narcotic murder case in Sterling Johnson's office, Special Narcotics Prosecutor. So Manhattan North, NYPD, had brought over a case to the feds at the Eastern District of New York, where I was assigned at that time with several other agents. And they had spent a year or so with an informant delivering large amounts of Manite and quinine. Manite's a baby laxative. Quinine's used to treat malaria. Okay. And these guys were not into laxatives or, finding a cure for malaria, but it's also an essential deal you want to cut heroin. Right. So you get a pound of heroin, get 2 pounds of cut, mix it up, and then you have large amounts of heroin to sell because everything was at the street level and the bag level. But they couldn't get any conversation about heroin what these guys were doing. But the city narcotics division knew that these guys were heroin dealers. They had them all identified. They know they had been previously arrested for heroin, but they had no state statute that said they couldn't sell diluents. So the Manite and quinine was coming from a pharmaceutical company in Canada. It was being trucked down to a hardware store in Avenue Way in the Lower East Side, Lieberman's hardware store. Hyman Lieberman was the guy where all the Manite and quinine was going to. Lieberman's guy was delivering the Manite and quinine, large amounts, 20 pounds here, 25 pounds there, to these Harlem drug dealers. And the police narcotics division had photographs, limited conversation, because they asked the delivery guy that asked them, what are they doing with all this Manite and quinine? They shut him down. I said, don't worry about what we're doing with it. Here's the money. Now get out of here. So they had all these deliveries, photographs, no conversation, but they knew they were heroin dealers. So they brought it over to the feds. We had a pretty aggressive and sharp prosecutor. He said, okay, I got it. He said, I'm going to charge them with distribution of heroin. He said, the theory of the government's case is they've all been convicted of heroin violations in the state. They're paying 10 times the normal amount to buy Manite and quinine. And Manite and quinine are the essential diluents used to cut heroin. So I'm going to charge them, technically, so I can charge them with heroin distribution. I'm going to do that. We had no heroin. We had no money. We had no conversation. Unique prosecution. But he knew, and I knew, that this was a New York jury. It's going to be a Brooklyn, New York jury, and they're going to say, where's the beef? And so I did some research, and I was able to determine that Frank Lucas, Hollywood's American gangster, was in federal prison on the West Coast, and he was cooperating. Okay, so me and the prosecutor flew out to the jail where he was. We told him about the case. We told him who the people were in the case. He knew them all. Oh, he did business with him, swapped Manite with him, with heroin with him, this, that, the other thing. And so we brought him back to New York. We had the marshal bring him back to New York. He was in protective custody at the courthouse. And every day the marshals would bring him over, and I'd spend time with him, debriefing him, getting him ready to testify in federal court for the first and only time. And it was interesting, too, because on one hand, there were a group of old-time agents that did not want Frank to get any benefit from testifying. And the reason is they said, Lew, when we arrested this guy claimed we took money out of his house. So in the movie, you'll see there's a seizure in Teaneck, New Jersey. I think the agent seized about $300,000 in small bills, right? That his wife threw out in a duffel bag, threw out the window. Had guys outside the window. They got it. Frank claimed it wasn't $300,000. It was $700,000. And you know how this thing goes. I mean, people think that, oh, the feds, the law enforcement, they all stick together. You make an allegation like that, hey, no promotion, no transfers, people looking at you with suspicion, but it's going to be investigated. So everything stops. And so they did a thorough investigation. But around that time is when you had Serpico, you had the Knapp Commission in the 70s. So you had a lot of incidents of law enforcement corruption. But the best thing the leaders in the New York office did during that time is they went out to Teaneck, New Jersey. And they told these guys on the warrant, I want you guys to stand single file, okay, in front of each other. And I want the guy in the back to search the guy in the front. Now, at first, these guys pushed back. Hey, what are you talking about? You don't trust us? He said, no. You don't understand this. There's going to be an allegation, okay? And we want to say this is what we did to make sure nobody had money or dollar bills stuffed in there. And they did. They searched each other. Nobody had anything. And it saved them when those allegations were made. But because those allegations were made, the old-time agents didn't want Frank to cooperate. So they weren't happy with me, but then they understood I needed him for the case. because if he didn't testify, yeah, technically we had an indictment, but, we had nobody to put it all together, and he could put it all together. Watching him and debriefing him and preparing him to testify was like getting a PhD in narcotics enforcement. Because the money laundering, the people at criminal facilitation, and he was operating at the highest level. He got into the business through Bumpy Johnson, who's the legendary first black drug dealer, up in Harlem, gangster, real gangster. Frank worked for Bumpy. That's just some disagreement on the extent of their relationship, but on the record, he told Bumpy he wanted to get into the heroin business, and Bumpy told him to go over there and talk with this guy, Zach Robbins. And that's how Frank started.
Yeah. Yeah, that Bumpy Johnson, there's a series out there.
Yes, Godfather Harlem.
Yeah. And that the executive producer of that is one of the executive producers from the Narcos series, Chris Brancato.
No kidding.
Yeah. Okay. Chris he's a New Yorker too, but we've stayed friends after all the Narcos stuff.
Well, they do a good job with that show with Forrest Whitaker.
They do
a very, very, very good job with that show.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those are sometimes the relationship between drugs and the communities, and the guy's somewhat of a Robin Hood by paying people's rent money and facilitating, sports leagues and all that stuff, which is good. But at the same time, they're selling something that's killing people.
Poison.
And once you get physically addicted to heroin, will you ever cure that? Because part of the getting straight is relapsing. And all the bridges you break along the way with bonds between family and friends, because it's going to be stealing and thievery, and it's just heartbreak when you talk to a heroin person. It's been involved, addicted to heroin, just heartbreak.
It is. Now, and so in that case, did those guys go to trial, or did they plead out?
Yeah, they did. No, they went to trial, and so it's interesting. So the guy in Canada was a guy by the name of Joel Merling. Hyman Lieberman was the guy in New York City, and the file title is Hyman Lieberman et al. United States versus Hyman Lieberman et al. That was the case file title. Those guys pled guilty, and the truck drivers pled guilty. Those guys pled guilty. The Harlem drug dealers, they went to trial. And I think there was about 8 of them. This guy, Leroy Butler, was the top guy who lived in Englewood Cliffs, New Jersey. And he had a large scale tennis court in his backyard. That's how these guys were living, with the Rolls Royce. Back then in the 70s, as I remember, everybody, the major guys we had arrested, the mafia guys, the heroin guys, they all had $1,000 cash pocket money. That was walk around money. And $1,000 in 78 is probably $6,000 or $7,000 now, right? But that was like pocket money. Every time you'd arrest them, they'd empty the pockets, at least had $1,000, just walk around money, But Frank knew all these guys, and if you know Frank, he's a great storyteller. He's quick to laugh. He can be charming. He's the kind of guy, if you spent some time with him, you'd walk away liking him, but just a cold-blooded killer, and he's the only guy, when he was resentenced from the 70 years to time served, I went, because I was working closely with him to have him testify. I went and sat with him, sat in the courthouse when they took his 30-year sentence down to time served. Took 2 hours.
Wow.
The judge he said, the first anonymous jury in the federal system was the Nicky Barnes case. A lot of people think that was a mafia case. It was the Nicky Barnes case before Frank, because these guys were killing all the witnesses. And so they had to have an anonymous jury to protect witnesses and protect juries. And so when Frank got convicted, the judges there was so much violence in his case that he was wondering, should he reduce it? But he did reduce him to time served.
Wow.
And
those defendants from just No heroin, but cut material. How much time did they get? Do you remember?
The top guy, Leroy Butler, 15 years.
Wow.
Another guy got 12 years. I think it was 15, 12, 7 and 8. I think the lowest guy got probably about 5 years, you know. And one of the guys had been arrested. This was the second time he was arrested because he was arrested in the case with this other legendary guy for DEA, Frank Matthews, that absconded on $3.5 million bail, was reduced down to like $750,000, never to be seen again. Almost 40 since 1973 when DEA was first formed.
Wow. And that's for our listeners. I don't want anybody to think this is, it's just another case. It's not. This was a groundbreaking case. There's no dope on the table.
No dope. It was a unique case, unique prosecution. Never just diluents, you know. And they appealed it and they were convicted, you know. But you had a Judge Mishler. Jacob Mishler was the judge in the Eastern District, and he had handled a lot of these narcotic cases. So he was familiar with the terminology. He was familiar with how these narcotic cases go. He was familiar with, you know, how money moves and what's said. And so he was the perfect judge for, and he was chief judge also. He was the perfect judge for this case because he understood the narcotics business, you know. And it sent a message to these guys also that, you know, if you're involved in anything that facilitates heroin, you can get tagged, you know.
I love it. I mean, it's not illegal to possess mannite or quinine.
No, not at all. Not at all.
In those quantities, it's very, very suspicious. So right.
And Frank put it all together because he knew all these guys.
Yep.
You know, and he you know, to watch him testify, you know, because they were trying to bait him and he was going back at him. But he was the only case he ever testified in, you know, but a very, very powerful and formidable witness.
And that's one of the things I love about DEA is people in DEA are not afraid to take on a challenge and try something new.
Right.
The challenge probably more, and of course not in your case, but the challenge is getting an assistant U.S. attorney to take the case.
Yeah.
There's a lot of them that like the easy cases and they don't want to have to do the hard work.
But I will tell you, Murph, that's the joy in New York City. You come into New York, you have the Eastern District, you have the Southern District, you have special narcotics, and they all vie for the DEA cases because the DEA cases are well investigated. Okay. The agents are comfortable testifying on the witness stand. In fact, the agents conduct the case knowing that they're probably going to be testifying, be questioned and cross-examined, but they're so thoroughly investigated using that global network that they all vie for the cases, you know, to take the DEA cases.
Yeah, we're beaming with pride. And I'm serious when I say that. That's what separates DEA from everybody else.
Without a doubt. Mm-hmm.
So, Lew, we've been going, believe it or not, we've been going over an hour here. And we're just scratching the surface, but I wanted to bring out those cases, especially that mannite and quinine case, because that was the first and it was monumental. You set a new standard there.
Yes.
But, everybody, Lew has agreed to give us another hour of his time. So come back tomorrow. Like I said, he's still in New York and he hasn't even gotten to his first overseas assignment yet. So that's where we're going next. So be sure to come back.
All right.
And listen, everybody, thank you so much for continuing to support the Game of Crimes here. This is coming out after the holidays, so I'm praying that you all had great Christmas time with your families, and we're praying that 2026 will be the best year that you've ever experienced. I'm going to continue to bring the best guests I can find on here, as evidenced by bringing Lew Rice on here, a true legend within DEA. I'm so honored to have him on here, but until tomorrow, stay safe out there. God bless. We'll see you then.